Rain Bennett buys a beach house through sacrifice. Over years, family members treat it as shared space. When Rain discovers her sister's wedding is being staged at her property without consent, she digs up proof of persistent boundary violations and, instead of collapsing into guilt, asserts firm limits, changes the locks, legally rents the property out, and forces the family to confront their entitlement. The story ends in slow reconciliation, a sisterly apology, regained peace, and Rain reclaiming space in her emotional life and career. Rain's Subaru bites into the drive with the tired familiarity of a path walked too often, a loop of gravel that has always felt like her small, earned permission to breathe. Salt edges the air and the house's white clapboard stands sun-washed and patient against the sky. She exhales as she shuts the engine, the sound of ocean wind following her like a secret. It takes 2 steps to know something is wrong. Voices ripple from the yard, too many, layered and buoyant. A white arch peeks above the fence, movement like choreography where there should have been only her hammock and the cat's slow patrol. Rain's hands knot on the steering wheel, and she walks the perimeter before she sees the full indignity: rows of folding chairs, a tent at the property's edge, strings of lights braided through her porch posts. People she does not know thread past her garden gnomes, while Serena, her sister, forever poised at the center of a room, stands like a director. The clipboard is an old weapon. Time shivers. Rain's lungs fill as if someone has closed a door on calm air. Serena's face lifts and, for a flash, Rain reads something like surprise there, then the practiced smile crystallizes. Rain. Perfect timing. We need your final say on the seating. Her voice is bright, but it's the kind of bright that cuts glass. Rain's mouth opens and the words gather like pebbles. What are you doing? Why didn't you ask? Instead, something smaller slips out. When did you plan this? It lands thin beneath the roster of voices. Months, Serena says like a fact. We've been working on this forever. Mother was thrilled. The word mother lands like a punctuation mark, a challenge to protest. The house behind Serena, Rain's house, has become a stage. She moves slower than she feels she should, past a table of engraved envelopes with her address on the invite, past strangers adjusting a centerpiece on a table that once held her late grandmother's photo. The world narrows to a single close-in image, Rain's own key, looped with severity on a maintenance hook she recognizes, absent from the halo of hands. Remembering the purchase is a quick, private film, the realtor's handshake, the tremulous pride in Rain's chest as she held the deed, her callous fingers after years of overtime. She tried to explain the cost, sacrifices, late nights, the thinning out of social calendars, without complaint. Her mother had cut through that memory then, sober and condescending, such a waste for one person. It had sounded like a joke at the time. Now it rings like an instruction. Serena's smile has the power of a closing ceremony. She dangles the word generous like an accolade, the generous sister. A planner coos about perfect lighting. People laugh in the way of conspirators. Rain stands at the margin where ownership dissolves because no one ever thought to ask. Every muscle wants to ignite, to tear down bunting, to shout until the sky is thin. Instead, Rain notices small details: the way chairs scrape the flagstone, the gentleness with which a man lays a hand on the arch. These are catalogs of loss. She steps back, breath even, and walks to her car. When Serena calls, pleading, coaxing, Rain does not turn. Rain drives away not in fury, but with meticulous quietness, the scene replaying like a film strip in her mind. By the time she reaches her apartment, the public phone calls bloom into missed ones. The screen is a constellation of her family's voices, each one a little more insistent than the last. She sits at her kitchen table, fingers finding the laptop's edge as if reaching for armor, and types the name of her sister into a search bar. The search is small and clinical, a first step. Information, like a tide, begins to reveal the hidden planning that will pull the ground from beneath her sense of belonging. Rain's apartment is a study in careful things. Books stacked by height, a coffee mug with a chip she swore she'd replace, a calendar with tiny notations for bills and volunteer shifts. She opens tabs like drawers, a Pinterest board of white roses and draped linen under Serena's name, An Instagram post of Serena and Thomas smiling on her own porch. A message from Thomas, short, apologetic, slight, "I'm sorry. I didn't push hard enough." Each click fits another brick into the wall of quiet betrayal. She doesn't call her family right away. Action, not theatrics. Something about this makes Rain think of contracts and lists and receipts. She hunts down proof, a group chat she's not in, property messages, a string of texts between mom and dad discussing logistics. The word assume repeats in a thread like a dirty chorus. She never uses it, easier to ask forgiveness. The timestamp sits like a small informant, months of planning, scribbled in the margins of their lives. Friend lines thread in. Marlene's voice is steady in the phone. James at work gives her a folder he helped compile, text logs, dated requests asking visitors to call, pictures of parties where strangers' hands have rearranged her things. The evidence is banal yet damning. Wine rings on tablecloths, a repair invoice for a deck board patched after a cousin's party, a blurry video of 6 strangers in her bedroom from 3 months ago. Mom leading them as if this was a parade through the family museum. Rain's emotion arrives as method, not roar. She installs cameras, not for spectacle but for record. She calls a locksmith in the evening and watches him swap an old brass knob for a new, firm cylinder, the click of the key like punctuation. Her heart beats, but her hands are steady. She drafts an email, polite, precise, about access requirements. She drafts a second one that will be used if that one fails. Information is an armory. Between the paperwork and the practicalities, there are small, private rituals that illuminate her shift. She rearranges the photographs on her living room wall, an unspoken claim, not to erase family, but to assert arrangement by consent. She catalogs repairs, a stack of receipts, a ledger of costs she never spoke of before. For the first time, she sees the true ledger of her life, invisible costs, the emotional ones recorded in nagging exhaustion, and an endless pattern of its family excuses. At work, she finds a different kind of audience. Coworkers listen when she speaks with a clarity that surprises her. She pitches a new proposal at the bank. Her confidence there has roots now in more than number crunching. Standing up to her family hardens her voice. James notices the change and jokes that once you change the locks on the emotional house, you start negotiating differently at the office. Rain doesn't laugh, but the corners of her mouth lift. Her planning has a certain artistry. She contacts a reputable coastal tour company with a single, quiet move, a signed contract for exclusive weekend use spanning several dates, including the wedding one. She values what she owns. She does not frame this as revenge. It is logistics, not vengeance, liability, rental fees, and a deposit. She imagines the beach house in a corporate brochure with tasteful photos, her home turned legal property in a document. The image steadies her. The family responds with the noise that entitles always produces, texts escalate, phone calls multiply. Her mother's calls are pitched with indignation. Serena's voice is raw, "You can't do this." But Rain has rehearsed a tone that is not brittle. She answers in a voice that feels like the house now, firm, measured, and irrevocable. She has done her homework and knows both legalities and boundaries. Her determination is not melodramatic, it is administrative, leveled, and unshakable. Evening comes with a small acknowledgement. Marlene helps Rain print a thick blue folder, evidence organized, dates highlighted, messages annotated. The folder is heavy and clean. Rain slides the paper into a manila envelope and pauses, hand on the flap. This is not a trap. This is a request for reciprocity. The moment is not about being cruel. It is about being visible. She sleeps that night for the first time since the discovery, an honest, deep sleep, because action has become a balm. The dinner is meant to be salvage. Instead, it is where everything unclenches. Rain sits across from the family under a restaurant's low pendant lights, the corner table their habitual battlefield. Serena's face is a map of outrage and wounded entitlement. Mom leans into emotional counsel. Father moves like a man who studies the angle of a problem before he offers settlement. Rain slides the blue folder across the table as if it were a menu, present, polite. She lets them take it in, receipts, timelines, soccer photos from weekends never asked about, a screenshot of the group chat that named her house by address and decided dates. The shame in the room is not cinematic. It's granular, little shifts, throat clears, fingers tapping the table. Her mother's practiced tact cracks. "We thought she would forgive," she says, searching for forgiveness as if it were a currency. But the real twist arrives not as thunder, but as a legal knock. Rain describes succinctly the contract she signed with Sandpiper Tours: exclusive use, deposit, insurance clause for guest liability. She lays out plain, enforceable facts, signatures, notarized dates, a clause that mandates setup on Friday afternoon. The family's anger curdles into immediate, messy recalculation. "No, you don't write, we'll fix it later," when a legal document sits on a small, tidy table. Serena's initial fury morphs into frantic bargaining. "We can reschedule," she says, voice thin. "We can rent another place." Rain listens and watches the flicker of shame. Thomas, usually deferential, is quiet. Rain reads on his face a strain she's never used as leverage before. He knows they pushed a boundary. He texts something short and apologetic, and that small chink of sympathy changes the room's acoustics. What Rain had not been prepared for is the relief hidden in her own throat when the contract is revealed. The family's entitlement is not built on malice so much as complacency. They never located Rain on their map of obligation. The legalities make them see her as she sees herself, a person who keeps accounting of houses, of money, of polite refusals that were ignored. But the twist sharpens. Even as the family scrambles, a new wave arrives. Other people appear at the driveway, officials from the tour company guiding their crew in with equipment and clipboards. Rain watches from across the street, breath held like a spectator at a match whose outcome she has arranged. Serena's face collapses into a blankness that has the edges of panic. Mom paces, dialing, pleading. Dad strides towards the incoming guests and tries to explain. The tour manager, impeccable, produces the contract. The document's paperweight is the final punctuation. The public unraveling is almost operatic. The wedding planner realizes the venue has been booked out. The caterer scrambles, a van pulls away. Guests arrive and leave bewildered. Updates trickle into social feeds, venue complication. And the candid cruelty of public embarrassment lands like rain on the family's vanity. It is humiliating but not cruel. Rain had not orchestrated spectacle. She had pressed the correct administrative key, and a lawful mechanism turned their assumptions into consequences. Back home that night, Serena calls in waves of hysteria. "How could you?" But Rain's response is steady. She doesn't gloat. She explains calmly the statistics of liability, the photographs of damage, the documentation of months of disregard. Her words are not accusations. They are a description of a boundary finally given teeth. In the aftermath, Rain sits on the porch swing as dusk rolls in, the ocean murmuring. There is the smell of smoke from someone's backyard grill and the dim pulse of human life continuing despite the collision. Rain realizes the fight was never with the wedding. It was with the pattern that allowed a single room to be everyone's assumption, but the owner's right. The legal intervention becomes a clarifying mirror. Entitlement, when reflected, looks small and tired. Later, screenshots show fractured text threads, apologies mixed with blame. Some relatives call Rain a villain. Others are tentative with acknowledgement. But in the quiet, Rain understands something new. She is capable of more than she imagined. The contract was not a trap. It was a contained insistence upon dignity. The social aftermath hums like a hive. Relatives post pointed comments. Serena's friends text in secret. Mom's sorrow curdles into performance. Public posts about family trials and forgiveness, not yet about responsibility. Each update is a small stone lobbed at a window Rain is calibrating to remain closed. At work, Rain's days thrum with normalcy. She reviews loan files and orchestrates meetings with a focus honed by last week's confrontations. The bank becomes a theater in which she rehearses authority. She is no one else's collateral. Yet the pressure at home is like weather, able to shape mood and routine. Her phone vibrates with messages: please, threats, pity, supplication. Rain filters them into folders, unread until the evening. She prepares for the inevitable face-to-face that will test more than legal footing. Weeks of bruised pride ferment into a formal dinner her parents arrange ostensibly to talk things through. Rain understands the script: tearful monologues, accusations of selfishness, appeals to sentiment. She prepares instead with a plan. No theatrics, no surrender. The evening is staged in her parents' living room. Serena arrives late, cheeks hollow, Thomas close behind, avoiding eye contact. The air is thick with choreography. Mom's practiced, "How could you?" Dad's measured, "We helped you," the cousinly chorus of side glances. Rain brings the blue folder, but this time it holds a different document, a one-page memorandum outlining the terms of access to her property going forward. Concrete terms written in plain language. Expectations and consequences, requests for permissions, timelines for visits, return of keys, and accountability for damages. It reads like a small covenant. Serena's first response is to cry and to label her sister cruel. "You ruined my wedding." She repeats the phrase until it loses all narrative truth and becomes simply an incantation. Rain, withholding anything like triumph, asks Serena to name a single time she asked permission before bringing people onto the property. The table falls silent. The question is surgical, and it finds empty space. The pressure ratchets when Dad tries a different tactic: nostalgia. He recalls rose-colored weekends with Grandpa Joe's voice and the unspoken tradition that family shared space. It is an appeal to myth. Rain responds with photographs: a glass ring on a quilt, a small burn on a deck board, receipts for repairs that cost her hundreds. They are tiny truths that add up, and the cumulative arithmetic of them is a quiet indictment. The family's old assumptions dissipate into numbers and timestamps. A new character subtly appears in the room: Aunt Linda, whose reputation for stern fairness has always intimidated Rain. She leans forward and asks, with bluntness, "Did you ever tell them not to come?" Rain nods and slides a printout across the table, emails and texts where she repeatedly asked for calls prior to visits. The list shows 26 requests across 3 years. Each date is a small, unarguable fact. The stakes shift. This is no longer only about a wedding, it is about systems of erasure. Rain's terms are not punitive. She explains they are the scaffolding for mutual respect. The family's reaction fractures between shame and bargaining. Mom offers to write an apology letter and to pay for repairs. Dad promises to return unearned keys. Serena promises to respect boundaries, moving forward with the tone of someone who has learned the phrase but not yet the practice. Rain realizes the central test is not punishment but sustainability. Her ask is obvious: return the keys, acknowledge the record, and consent to future access requests. Then she does something small and humane. She offers a path back, a trial visitation period, supervised visits, a shared calendar. It is not capitulation. It is craftsmanship of future relations. Before the night ends, Thomas steps out onto the porch, speaks with Rain alone. He apologizes simply, and in his apology there is no attempt to usurp responsibility. He offers, quietly, to help repair damages out of his own pocket. It is a small grace. Rain accepts, not because she needs money but because she recognizes a sincere attempt to rebind what negligence untied. The family leaves that night in a shape that is not entirely mended, but is no longer a ragged fracture. They go with homework, to examine habits and membership assumptions. Rain watches them go, feeling the familiar anxiety and a gentler steadiness, the knowledge that the next step is not an act of war but a practice of respect. She stores the folder of documents back in its place and breathes. The house she loves is no longer a margin, it is a boundary with a door. The real test arrives in small, human currency. The knock that matters is not a court summons, but a sister on the porch with a small, trembling voice. Rain does not expect Serena's apology to arrive wearing fragile sincerity, and yet here it is, unadorned and late. The climax is not a courtroom verdict, but the intimate, raw confrontation where power and vulnerability meet. Serena appears at Rain's door 2 months after the wedding fiasco, wearing a dress that suggests she's trying on civility. The porch light frames her in forgiving warmth. She steps up the path with nervous hands, the gesture of someone who understands they have been both taken for granted and now must be forgiven. Rain opens the door with an expression that contains both memory and a new composure. She invites Serena in without a trace of triumph in her voice. They sit in Rain's living room among objects that have been rearranged by consent, her grandmother's photo placed where she chooses, not where others assumed it belonged. Serena's first words tumble out, raw and unpracticed. "I'm sorry. I didn't understand how much it cost you, how much it meant." The apology is incomplete but honest. Rain listens without interrupting. The house holds them like a quiet witness. The crux arrives when Serena says, in halting admission, that the wedding planning gave her a sense of belonging she had longed for, a family ritual where she felt seen. She confesses that asking felt like risking rejection, so she and others defaulted to assuming. The confession is not an excuse. It is a raw sense of weakness, a sudden, humanizing fissure in the antagonist's armor. Rain feels something lift and also feel the ache of years bruised. She speaks with a softness that amazes even her, not vindication but a disclosure of limits, what the house has cost her in small disappearances, the quiet accumulations that eroded her patience. She explains that boundaries were not meant to be punitive, they were the structure through which love could be practiced respectfully. Her voice is the voice of someone who discovered that dignity is not a luxury but a necessity. Serena begins to cry, short, startled breaths that speak of remorse. She vows to return the spare keys she never had the courage to give up and asks permission for a future visit, promising to text in advance and to bring just a few people. The plea is simple, ashamed, and true. But the climax has another chord. Rain produces a letter, simple, legal, and kind, that outlines mutual expectations if visits are resumed. It is not a list of ultimatums. It is an invitation to co-create terms for shared moments. Rain will let them re-enter if they can agree to accountability. The paper sits between them like a treaty. Serena reads it, the words catching in her throat. Then comes the step that seals the new covenant, a small, tangible act of reparation. Serena offers, without fanfare, to pay for a new set of cushions Rain chose, worn from the invasion of so many feet, and to host one small dinner in the apartment where Rain decides the guest list. It is not ample restitution for all the lost hours and petty violations, but it is a symbolic stitch. The emotional crescendo is not a shout, but the two sisters folding into a fragile reconciliation. They stand, embrace awkwardly, then with increasing steadiness. Rain feels no triumph, only a tempered sorrow and a fragile hope. The house sits behind them, intact and private. The ocean noise is distant, like applause for small victories. Outside later, Rain locks the front door and then, after a pause, picks up her phone to text her parents. No sermons, no demands, just an offer. Dinner next Sunday. BYO respect. The message is gentle and firm. This final exchange is the pivot. Rain does not win by erasing family. She wins by demanding the dignity that allows love to be sustainable. The climax resolves not in spectacle but in the delicate arithmetic of new agreements, and in that quiet resolution Rain steps into a room of her own making. 6 months pass in small, honest increments. Rain wakes to the ocean's pulse as she always did, but now the rhythm feels like the house's own careful consent. The cushions she selected, soft teal, catch the morning in a way that is private and exactly hers. She drinks coffee on the porch, hands wrapped around warmth, and watches sandpipers stitch the waterline. The peace is guarded but genuine. Life outside the house has also shifted. At the bank, Rain's new responsibilities reflect a woman who has learned to name what she needs. Her pitch proposals are sharper, her voice more authoritative. James jokes that the board meetings have never seen someone who negotiates both mortgages and family with such clarity. Rain smiles without deflection. Her phone buzzes occasionally with family notes, small bribes of affection, tentative photos of grandchildren she may one day meet, and a text from Serena. Thanks again. For everything. The tone is lighter. Not everything is repaired. Aunt Patricia still mutters about grudges, and Uncle Steve remains convinced that family homes are eternal commons, but those who matter have begun to practice the small discipline of asking. Rain hosts once that summer, A modest, deliberate dinner at her table for Mom, Dad, Serena, and Thomas. Invitations were emailed 2 weeks prior. RSVPs were all but required. Keys were not exchanged until after hugs and a short, sincere apology from Serena. The meal is quiet, savory, and respectful. Conversation edges into safer topics at first: work, the stock of shrimp at the local market, until laughter breaks and the table relaxes. Moments of spontaneous joy occur but are bracketed by Rain's governance. No surprise guests, no wandering through private rooms. After the plates are cleared, Serena retreats to Rain's small pottery class certificate on the wall and says, softly, "You've made this feel like yours." Rain's face shifts, gratitude, fatigue, and something like relief that is deeper than any smile. The sisters walk to the porch and watch the horizon where sky and sea blur into a suggestion of infinite possibility. Time allows small things to reveal themselves. Rain notices that the bookshelves hold her turn-of-century novels and a few of Serena's cookbooks, returned when asked. The wind chimes she hung last spring tinkle with a cadence that feels like an agreement. The house, once a locus of invisible incursions, is now a place where boundaries make hospitality possible, not impossible. Months later, Serena drops by unannounced, but only once, and stands at the gate, phone raised. She texts first. Rain opens the gate. They walk the yard together, eyes tracing the line where the bank of dune meets the property, each footstep chosen rather than assumed. There's an ease now, a quiet choreography of consent. The final scene settles on Rain alone at dusk, porch lights spilling amber, a half-full cup of tea cooling in her hand. She watches the sea, chest unshrugging from months of armor. A neighbor's dog barks far off, a boat cuts its slow wake, and somewhere in town the wedding music she almost lost drifts faintly and harmlessly into the night. Rain thinks back to the first time she drove up the driveway and saw the arch, the ledger of her life that cataloged small injuries, and the moment she decided to act. The decision had been less dramatic than she expected: no explosion, no villain's downfall, no cinematic revenge, but its consequence was clearer than any victory lap: the life she wanted and the life she would no longer give up without agreement. She locks the porch door, the key now a quiet companion. The camera pulls back as she rocks gently, not in retreat but in contentment. The ocean, the house, and Rain exist in their own relation now, bounded, respected, and open in ways that matter. The last line of the film is not a speech but a single, beholden thought she allows herself aloud to the wind: "This is mine." The words are neither claim nor boast, but a simple assertion of self, hard-won, true, and finally at rest.